Shalom and welcome to this home edition of the Middle East Report. In this program today, we have an exclusive interview with Dr. Mordechai Kedar, one of the world's leading experts on the Middle East and Islam. And we'll be asking, can the Abraham Accords survive under President Biden? Warm welcome to the program, and my special guest today is Mordechai Kedar, all the way from Israel. Mordechai, it's been about 10 years since I've interviewed you in our studios in London, so thanks to COVID-19 and Zoom technology, I'm able to interview today. But for many of our viewers who don't know who you are, and you are one of the world's leading experts on the Middle East and Islam, can you share with us something about your Israeli background and your 25-year distinguished career in Israeli military intelligence?
Well, I was born in Tel Aviv to a family which originally came back to Israel after exile from Poland. And my mother tongue is Yiddish. We didn't have anything in Arabic at home, but I fell in love with a teacher of Arabic in the high school. He was originally actually from Germany, but he knew Arabic very well. And I fell in love with the language. I fell in love with the culture, with Islam. I'm not a Muslim, I'm Jewish, but for me, it was like an enchanted forest to go into and to explore lands and cultures and religions in plural, which I had no clue about beforehand. So for me, it was like a journey to an unknown land. And this is actually what attracted me to learn Arabic and Islam and so forth. And since we learned for 4 years in the high school Arabic with this excellent teacher, we, the whole group of like 13 kids, we went to the military intelligence and we served there as much as everyone served. I served for 25 years in a unit which combines Arabic and mathematics and technology. And I got released in 1995, and since then I am in the academia. I accomplished my PhD towards the end of the 90s about the Assad propaganda, means the language or the linguistics of the Syrian media under Hafez Assad. And but I broadened with the years, I broadened the scope to include also Islam, Islamic movements, other countries than Syria. And this actually what gives me the ticket to speak about other Arab countries. And here I am today in front of your audience, maybe to answer some questions about what happens in the Middle East.
Fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on the Middle East Report. And I'm a big fan of your work. And you bring so much information and light in terms of what is going on regarding Israel and the Middle East. Today, we're discussing the historic Abraham Accords. And of course, we all saw the signing of those Abraham Accords on the White House lawn, I think last October, between Israel, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Can you give us the strategic and historical background information about how these Abraham Accords came about?
Well, it depends when you start history, you know.
Recent history.
Okay. Look, the Arab League was actually established in 1945, in the aftermath of the Second World War. And the Arab League almost immediately became an arena for a struggle between two groups of states. One group was Egypt under Gamal Abdel Nasser, the socialist. Syria which later became under the Ba'ath socialist, and Iraq as well, and Libya with its leader, and the southern Yemen, which was Marxist. So all these progressive countries, as they call themselves, in Arabic, Takadumiya, were on one side. All are under the umbrella of the Soviet Union, which was also trying to show face as if it is a socialistic country. On the other side, there was another group of countries in the Arab world, which were, as far as could be, from these progressives. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Jordan, the Emirates since the beginning of the 70s, and Bahrain, and all these traditional countries, conservative countries, which were actually kings, emirs, these old-fashioned, as they were posed, old-fashioned countries. And since the radical group were under the Soviet hegemony, they, means the kingdoms and the emirates, went to seek asylum under the aegis of Britain, of NATO, and especially the United States of America. And this is actually what made these two blocks inside the Arab world. Happened that not only they were targeted by the propaganda of the radical countries, means the socialist, progressive countries, Israel was also attacked by Egypt of those days, and Syria and Iraq, and those radical countries, which actually built their legitimacy on the idea that Israel should be eradicated and the war against Israel should be forever. And this is actually how they try to create for themselves legitimacy by fighting Israel. So Israel was targeted by these countries and by the radical countries, and also Saudi Arabia and the other traditional conservative countries as well. So we found ourselves with them targeted by the same group of countries. So this already those days brought, proximity between Israel and those traditional countries. It wasn't obvious to the open eye, but it was behind the scenes. This is one thing which we should bear in mind as the background. Another thing is that Israel never had any war with them because they don't have borders with us. Who have the borders? Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Egypt. We don't have borders with Saudi Arabia. We don't have borders with the Emirates or Bahrain or Morocco or Sudan. So they don't carry in mind and in memory all kinds of memories about soldiers who are being befallen and so forth. So they never had any struggle with Israel, factually, those countries. So why should we be the enemies of Israel? Otherwise, after all, Israel never attacked us and never had anything against us. So if you combine these two backgrounds, the radical countries and the fact that these countries never had any war with us, this is the background. Now what happened is that the Arab world today is different. Why? Nobody anymore remembers the 1948 disaster as they had here, because it happened 70-something years ago. Whoever is under 80 years old doesn't remember that era. So why should we carry the memory of Palestine? We don't remember this. It's not in the air. It's not in the agenda of these people to liberate Palestine. Add to this the fact that the Palestinians, with the years, actually brought much of resentment from these countries about the Palestinians. Don't forget, the Palestinians sided with Saddam Hussein when he invaded Kuwait. And Kuwait is one of the traditional countries. The Palestinians today, especially Hamas, are with Iran, are getting money from Iran and from Qatar, which is viewed as the enemy of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. So the Palestinians actually side themselves with countries which are not in favor of the Emirates and other and the Saudis and others. So why should they support the Palestinians if they are siding with Saddam Hussein historically and today with the Iranians? So the Palestinians actually justified with their behavior this attitude of leaving the Palestinian issue and for going forward with Israel to solutions apart from the Palestinians. This is another thing. But also something which recently definitely pulled the rug under the Palestinian cause. The Palestinians are shouting, to the whole world, come and liberate Palestine because Palestine is stolen by the Jews. The one who is doing it every day is actually the channel Al Jazeera. The Al Jazeera channel, which is operating from Qatar, and the mastermind of Al Jazeera is a Palestinian guy named Jamal Rayan. And he is actually the content manager of Al Jazeera. And he's a Palestinian. And he grew up in Jordan and he spent some time in Korea. But now he established Al Jazeera all the way in 1996. He is the first face which people who watch Al Jazeera saw. And they see him every single night. And he's a chief narrator of Al Jazeera. And he keeps calling about, to the Islamic world, to the Arab world, to liberate Palestine, liberate Palestine. Recently, people found out that his father, Mustafa Rayan, was one of the biggest land dealers before 1948. And he actually sold to the Zionists large parts of the land of Israel. Means the wealth of the family came from selling Palestine to the Jews. So now Jamal Rayan, his son, is coming and want us, Arabs and Muslims, to go and liberate Palestine? For what? So he can sell it again? Okay. So when Arabs and Muslims found out this thing, the Jamal Rayan, the chief of Al Jazeera, his father sold lands to the Jews, they tell the Palestinians, go and leave us alone. You sold your land to the Jews, and now you want us to go and shed our blood on your country, which you sold to the Jews to liberate it? Okay? So when you accumulate all these things, you can very easily understand the attitude of the Arab world, especially those countries, vis-a-vis to the Palestinians. Another thing, since 2 years ago, when in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, people started to talk about normalization, not only peace, but also normalization with Israel, a Saudi blogger came to Israel. His name was Muhammad Saud. And he came and he was the guest of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here. And they took him to all kinds of places. He went by himself with a bodyguard to Jerusalem to pray in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, means the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
But the Palestinians recognized him and they started throwing at him chairs, fruits, and one of them actually went and was spitting on that Saudi blogger. Spitting on a man, to the camera means humiliation. And the Palestinians were so proud that one of their kids actually spat at this Saudi blogger. The Saudis were deeply, deeply offended by the fact that the Palestinian is spitting at one of them, a Saudi guy, and the Palestinians rejoice this fact. So the Saudis started another campaign against the Palestinians, claiming what I claimed for many years already, that the Al-Aqsa Mosque originally was not in Jerusalem. It was in Saudi Arabia near a village named Ju'urana, according to Islamic sources. And this is something which I came out with already 12 years ago, even more. And little by little, people started to understand that I was right. And people started to talk about this. And last November, the newspaper Okaz in Saudi Arabia, which is an official newspaper, published the whole article under the title, "Where is Al-Aqsa?" And his conclusion in this article is that Al-Aqsa is not in Jerusalem. Al-Aqsa is in Jorana, means near Mecca. Okay, as just what I say for 12 years. And this actually is pulling the rag under the religious claim of the Palestinians to the land of Israel.
Amazing.
And today the Saudis are siding with Israel in many cases. Well, it's already in 2006 when we had the war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Already then the Saudis sided with us. They said that Hezbollah is fighting the wrong war against the wrong enemy. Means he should fight Syria, he should fight Iran. That's what they hinted. Okay, already in 2006. So you see the a very, very, I would say, slow advance of these traditional Arab countries towards Israel, because in the Middle East, things are being done very slowly.
So how much is this also generated by fear of the Iranian regime and fear that Iran is having is close to a nuclear breakout that is really leading the Saudis, the Gulf states, the Jordanians and the Egyptians to form a closer strategic and military ties with the Jewish state?
Definitely. Iran is frightening the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Bahrainis and the Kuwaitis. And, actually they frighten the whole Arab world, because the Arab world is divided, fragmented. Countries are fighting each other inside the Arab world, boycotting each other and so forth. So the Arab world actually as a unit doesn't exist anymore. It's a dead body. Dead. The Arab League or the Arab Summit didn't assemble for years already, because if they come together to one place, they will kill each other, they will shout at each other, and it will be shameful for them, such a gathering. So they don't gather with each other. So the Arab world as a world, as a group of countries, does not function anymore. One of the Egyptian journalists once said in the BBC that the Arab League is like a dead body, which nobody has the courage to fill a death certificate for. That's how he described the Arab world. And on the other side, you see Iran, so far a country, with one agenda, with an army, with intelligence, with money until the sanctions. And this country, Iran, actually devastates other Arab countries by inciting the Shia minority against the others. This is what happened actually in Lebanon. This is what happened in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. And whenever there is a Shia minority, they try to agitate the situation. They try also to do it in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has a Shia minority. But Saudi Arabia so far succeeded to maintain law and order vis-a-vis the Iranian aspirations. Bahrain suffers from this because, as you might know, Bahrain has a majority of Shia who speaks Persian at home, governed by a minority of Arabs who are Sunni. So yes, they definitely feel the hot air from behind, coming from the Iranian breath right behind their necks. So they're much afraid, and there's another good reason for them to get in touch with Israel, although they are more than sure that Israel will not send the IDF in order to rid them of the Iranian problem.
So, Mordechai, you wrote an excellent article entitled "No Longer United Against Israel," in which you say that the Middle East is divided into two camps. The first camp, the Iranian camp, and then the other camp, the the Saudi camp. Can you explain to us the coalition of Arab states that are in this coalition Is this primarily because we've seen over the last decade or so, America completely withdraw from the region?
I think it would happen even if America was here. The only thing which would prevent such a development is if America did the one and only thing in order to get rid of the Iranian nuclear atomic program. And look, the two blocks in the Middle East are as follows. Iran is heading a bloc, which includes Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, Yemen, and the Gaza Strip as well. While the other camp, headed by Saudi Arabia, includes the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Sudan, to a large degree, and maybe Kuwait tries to be in the middle, Oman tries to be in the middle, but this is more or less the two blocks. Morocco can be very well added to the Saudi camp. And this is actually the countries which Iran took over by its militias, by its money, by undermining the regimes, as it was in Lebanon, in Yemen. And while the other countries are still functioning countries, most of them are traditional conservative countries, and they definitely unite against the Iranian invasion of the region. Let me tell you something, Simon. The only way how to prevent such a situation and actually to save the world from the Iranian problem is the one and only way. If the only man in the world who can do it means the American president will send the Iranians a message saying as follows: dear Iranians, your time is over and your game is over. We don't believe any word which you say. There is no point to sign anything with you. You have exactly 1 week from now, to dismantle all your facilities in these locations, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so forth. Ship them all out to us, and you have exactly a week to do the whole thing. If you fail to finish the job by the end of the week from now, we are flattening you with the earth. We will not leave a break on a break in Iran. Take us seriously. Read our lips. We mean what we say, and we say what we mean, and we are around you, and we are already warming the engines. Don't call us, and we won't call you anymore. Just take us seriously. Simon, let me tell you, the more credible this threat is, the more are the chances that you won't have to use it. Because the Iranians as a state, as a society, are not suicidal. If they believe that you will destroy them in a week from now, if they fail to dismantle their atomic facilities, everything which was mentioned, they will do it because we know it. How do we know? If you remember, right after the revolution of 1979, the Iranian mob actually assaulted on the American embassy, and they caught 50-something diplomats who were in the embassy, and they kept them in jail. You know, it's forbidden to keep a diplomat in jail. They kept them in jail for 444 days, like a year and a half. These 52, I think, diplomats were released by the Iranians, and the airplane which carried them out from Iran left the Iranian airspace at the minute in which the new president, Ronald Reagan, was standing on the lawn of the White House, pledging allegiance to the Constitution as the incoming president. Why did they do it? Why did they release? Not even one penny they got. Nothing. No agreement, no nothing. They just sent the man out. Why? Because along the campaign, until the elections, Reagan kept saying, the first thing which I'm going to deal with when I walk into the White House will be Iran. And he said it in a way which they took it as a credible threat that he will deal with them in a way which, if they survive, they will never forget. So they understood that the game is over, and they released the boys. Simon, this is the only way which the Iranians understand what you tell them, and they obey what you ask them to do. So other, they are the best negotiators in the whole world. They could sell you the island of Great Britain, Simon, and you will buy it from them because they know how to sell things and they know how to negotiate. Simon, this is the only way. How? To persuade them to get rid of the nuclear military program. Look, they signed the NPT treaty, the No Proliferation Treaty, but they cheated the whole world. Israel proved that they had a military program to produce a nuclear bomb by the archive, which we stole from Iran. And today everybody can come and see what is written there. There is no other way to interpret what we found there. And now the whole world can see it. Now, these days, they are producing metal uranium. Metal uranium has no use other than a nuclear bomb. They have a heavy water reactor. Heavy water is used only for a bomb. So you have all the evidence and all what you need in order to know that they actually are cheating the world, including Britain, because Britain is part of the JCPOA of 2015. And the world actually believes them to a degree that today the United States of America under Biden is trying to find a way how to get back to the JCPOA and to lift the sanctions from Iran.
So my big question really is that the Iranian regime actually feared President Trump primarily because of his unpredictability. He was able to get the Saudis and the Gulf states and Israel and back their traditional allies in the Middle East in a confrontation against the Iranian regime. We know that the sanctions were working, and had he won a second term in office, it looks very likely the Iranian regime could have collapsed. But why didn't President Trump, in your opinion, actually take out Iran's nuclear facilities? Because the regime was very scared of him as president.
Well, take out means a war. You mean to bomb them?
Yeah, to bomb their nuclear facilities, yeah.
They will not volunteer to dismantle these facilities. Now, about bombing them, it won't work because of a very special reason. The Iranians took some lessons from the Iraqis. And since Israel in 1981 got rid of the Iraqi nuclear reactor, which was to the south from Baghdad, because it was exposed, it was on the ground. So the Iranians learned, and their facilities are deep under the mountains, in caves, in tunnels, or in all kinds of holes which they dug under the mountains. And in order to penetrate those places, you cannot bomb them from above, because above you have to go through 500 or maybe even 1,000 meters of rock. There is no bomb in the world which can penetrate a kilometer of a rock, because they dug the tunnels into those mountains from the valley, near the mountain. So you have to send a group of soldiers to isolate the area, and these soldiers have to fight into the target and fight inside the target because they have heavy doors in these tunnels. And you need, first of all, intelligence, how these tunnels look like, how much explosives you need in order to penetrate these places. It's a big operation. And it is a war. And in a war, a la guerre comme a la guerre, in a war like in a war, and there are casualties. I'm not sure that any American president would like to send the American soldiers in order to, knowing that at least part of them will come back in coffins. This doesn't add to his popularity. So, in America, for good reasons, doesn't like to be the policeman of the whole world. So they didn't go into war with the Iranians. Yet, threatening the Iranians doesn't necessarily mean to attack the nuclear sites. If you promise them that within a week you destroy everything else, oil infrastructure, communications, railway stations, bridges, everything which is on the ground, you destroy, they will understand that they actually, if they don't comply, you actually bring them back to the Stone Age. And if they believe that you are serious, they will give up.
So Mordechai, I have to ask you, and this remains a great mystery to me, but when President Obama was president of the United States, his key focus was to empower the Iranian regime at the expense of the moderate Sunni Arab states and Israel. And looks like Biden is going in the same direction. Why, under the Democrats, do they see that the Iranian regime is their ally when this is a totalitarian regime?
Well, for this, you need to interview somebody who's expert about American political arena, expert about the Democrats. I definitely have no explanation. What I can tell you is here in the Middle East, when Obama was here, especially after his Cairo address, people here started talking about his plan. His plan was to actually divide the Arab world to two parts. The part which is to the west from Israel, means Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and the part which is to the east of Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and so forth. What people say here, that Obama had a plan actually to give the Shia everything which is to the east from Israel, and on the way to destroy Saudi Arabia or to turn it into the Shia, and so is Jordan. After all, Syria is by Alawis, which are like Shia, and Iraq is Shi'i, and Lebanon is Shi'i. So only what you have to do is to give the Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Jordan to the Shia and finished. And the whole Mashriq, as they say in Arabic, the eastern part of the Middle East will be Shi'i, while the Sunnis will flourish and live and be nice in wherever is to the west from Israel. So this is what people thought. This is his plan, because this way everyone will have his part of the land, and the war between the Sunni and the Shia will finish, because everyone has his own half of the Arab world, and end of the problems. Well, this, according to this theory, after all, he was Shia, don't forget. His name was Muhammad Barack Hussein Obama. Hussein is a very common name within Shia, not only, but it is very common name within the Shi'i communities, and people here thought that he actually was a Shi'i Muslim, after all, with this name. So this is what people here say. If this is correct or not, you have to interview Barack Obama.
How is the impact of the new Biden administration having on the Arab world, and particularly this coalition that involves Israel and the Saudis and the Gulf states and Jordan and Egypt against the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Well, no doubt that Iran, or the regime in Iran, feels much more comfortable, much more safe, and much more emboldened. A few weeks ago, we saw the beginning or continuation of heavy attacks on Saudi Arabia. The airports are being attacked on almost a weekly basis. Don't forget what happened in September, when people thought that Biden is going to win. Iran bombed, it was in the night of the 14th of September. Iran bombed it was the 19 already, and bombed the oil facilities of Aramco in Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis learned the lesson. They don't run forward with Israel because of this, because they're afraid of the Iranians. The Iranians are attacking ships in the seas. They launch missiles even against American bases in Iraq. Means you can very easily see that the Iranians, first of all, never were brought to their knees anyway. But now they feel much more emboldened. And yes, we here in the Middle East are very much afraid of this a monster, which we consider Iran to be. Lebanon is being taken by Hezbollah. Parts of Syria are controlled by Iran. Israel tries to reduce the Iranian enthusiasm about Syria once in a while. Iran is controlling parts of Iraq, not to mention Yemen. And Yemen, don't forget, is the gateway to the Indian Ocean, from the Mediterranean, from the Atlantic Ocean, from Britain. It means every ship, British ship, which goes to India or to Australia or to Japan or Korea, actually has to go through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, which is right under the nose of the Iranians in Yemen. So they can attack with whoever they like, because they know which ships use the strait. Israel uses it. The whole world, this is actually the path to the east. The only other way is to go around Africa, which is a very dangerous route. So this is the situation. Iran today, especially under Biden, is much more emboldened because they see the Americans actually lifting in the near future, lifting the sanctions and going back to the JCPOA.
So when it comes to the Palestinian issue, we saw that under President Trump, he actually froze out the Palestinian Authority, closed their diplomatic office in Washington, D.C., pulled the United States out of UNESCO because of its treatment for Israel, froze funding to the Palestinian Authority. And now we see that Biden's doing a complete reversal of bringing the Palestinian issue right at the center of the new administration's Middle Eastern foreign policy. How is that going down in the rest of the Arab world?
Well, it's not only this. There are all kinds of signs that the American administration is actually working with the PA in order to create a Palestinian state in spite of the Israeli objection. You could see very, very well all kinds of documents which Mahmoud Abbas publicized in recent weeks, and you can very, very easily see the American fingerprints on these documents. The elections which he all of a sudden wants to, to arrange in the Palestinian Authority after 15 years of no elections. All of a sudden he wants elections. What happened? Americans told him, you make elections, so so your regime will be viewed as legitimate, at least in the American media. And the media actually shapes the American public opinion. So if you want to be viewed as a state in the public opinion, here in America, you need to give the media at least the look of elections. So he made elections. Then 2 days ago, he announced that he is closing all the polls with Hamas. And Hamas will be part of the elections. Hamas is a terror organization, but in the United States of America, the new administration actually renewed the Muslim Brotherhood influence, which they had during the days of Barack Obama. Trump kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood from Washington altogether, but now they are coming back, and they are, don't forget, they are the ideological brothers of Hamas, and they told Hamas to announce that they accept the state of Israel in the borders of 1949. Means without Jerusalem, without anything. So, but it's not the end of the game. Means they will recognize Israel, but continue the struggle against Israel. This is what they announced. So, this is as much as Hamas can be friendly to Israel. But this apparently is enough for the American administration to recognize Hamas as a legitimate organization after it is designated as a terror organization in the United States according to the law. So this is definitely, you can see the influence of the Biden administration. And the third thing is another thing which was published 2 days ago, in the 20th of February, that Mahmoud Abbas actually made out a decree in order to release all the political prisoners and the political detainees. He allows the political propaganda. He allows political activity. He allows assembly of meetings and rallies for political reasons. Means he actually free or set free the political life in the Palestinian Authority. For me, this is a very, very clear sign of American intervention. American intervention. They told him, you do this, 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 and that, so your image in the American media will look normal and people will support you. And this way we can also recognize the state of Palestine or so forth. So, and I don't know if you know, Simon, whenever there is something like this, anywhere in the world, you can be sure that beforehand, the leaders of some countries agree to the document, and they actually maybe even formulate the document together. So the fact that Mahmoud Abbas issued this decree 2 days ago, I'm more than sure that the Americans read it beforehand. They had their comments, and it was, published according to their view. No doubt at all. So this is what happens. Behind the scenes, the Biden administration most probably are sitting with the Palestinians and planning how to establish a Palestinian state in a way which the American public arena will be willing to accept it. Of course, in Israel, we don't accept it because we are afraid that a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria will turn into another Hamastan, just like Gaza.
Absolutely.
And Hamas can again win the elections as they did already in January 2006, or take it over by force as they did in Gaza in June 2007. Who will prevent it? Biden will prevent it. He will send his army to kick Hamas out of this place. No, we will have to deal with this problem after they have a state recognized by the United States and maybe Britain as well, and some other countries as well. Now go deal with this. It's not easy at all. So this is what I believe they prepare for us. And when we see the people, look, I even suspect that the one who actually is the correspondent for the Palestinian Authority in the American administration is a guy named Baitar. I forgot his first name, who is in charge of the relations between the National Security Council in the States and the intelligence community. Means a Palestinian guy who is well known for his activity, long years activities against Israel, as a student, I think in Georgetown University, I'm not sure. He is actually seeing all the intelligence which comes from the American intelligence organizations to the National Security Council.
So what does this mean for in terms of US and Israeli relations? I mean, 4 great years under President Trump, and Israel was America's closest ally. He moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, said that the Jewish settlers were not breaching international law. And yet we see this new Biden administration effectively turn against Israel, her closest friend and ally in the region.
Well, apparently they exchange Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates with Iran or Qatar. Qatar, anyway, look, Qatar hosts a very important American airbase in a place named Udaid. But yes, the Biden administration, I really don't understand what drives them to such a disastrous policy vis-a-vis the Middle East. Disastrous for many countries in order to favor a country. You know, somebody told me that, well, they are against the Saudis because the Saudis actually abuse human rights. And maybe Israelis as well, in Palestinian Authority, you know, or in the occupied territories, all these things. You know what, Simon? Let's assume that this is correct. What, the Iranians are human rights keepers? They keep human rights?
No chance.
What do they do to the Ahwazis? You know, there is a region in Iran named Ahwaz, populated by Arabs, who, by the way, describe their land, the Ahwaz, as the occupied territories. This is how they call it, because Iran occupied it in 1925. So they are occupied almost for 100 years. And every morning, when they go to work, they see cranes in the streets. And these cranes actually are hanging people. People are hung up from cranes. And they do it in the street in order to deter everyone who would think to act against the regime. Okay? This is human rights in Iran. How did they crash the demonstrations? What did they do to get to the girls, to the students who were demonstrating against the regime? Every one of them was raped in jail. Not even one was left without being raped. Okay? Human rights, you know? And okay, so to say that they are they are actually shaping their policy vis-a-vis Israel and Saudi Arabia, according to the situation of the foreign workers in the Emirates. Okay, there are some reports about this as well. I'm not claiming that Saudi Arabia and Emirates and maybe Israel as well is heaven on earth. Yet, to shape your policy on this ground, on the human rights issue, while you ignore the mass abuse of human rights in Iran, this, you can call it hypocrisy.
I call it very dangerous and scary, to be honest, Mordechai. We're down to the last 6 minutes of the program, and it's been absolutely fascinating so far. But the big question is, can the Abraham Accords survive the Biden administration? And with his desire to empower the Iranian regime, as well as push forward for the creation or the establishment of a Palestinian state?
It all depends on how long will be the leash which the Americans will give to the Iranians. If the Iranians feel that they are free to do whatever they like, they will tell the Emiratis, hey guys, if you go forward with Israel, we'll be very angry. It will be enough, a hint for the Emiratis to freeze almost everything, if not everything, which they did with Israel. because they are not willing to sacrifice their oil production facilities on the altar of Israel. They live without Israel until recently. They can live without Israel, in the future as well. And they are not willing. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. They have to survive it, and they are much closer to Iran than us. And they don't have any way to deter Iran. Israel allegedly has some kind of deterrence vis-a-vis Iran. This maybe explains why Iran doesn't retaliate for what Israel is doing to the Iranian forces and their militias in Syria on a weekly basis. So what I'm saying is that it all depends on the Biden administration. If the Biden administration, let's say, get back into the JCPOA and lift the sanctions, but tell the Iranians, hey guys, you leave the Emirates alone and let them do whatever they like with Israel, because if you threaten the Emirates, you have a problem with us. If this is the message, so apparently the Emirates will continue, and Bahrain, of course, and will continue with the relations with Israel. But if the Americans will tell the Iranians, we are with you, and you do whatever you like, so this might be very easily the end of the achievements of the last months between Israel and the Emirates.
So how does Israel respond to this new strategic developments in the Middle East? We know for the past 4 years that the closeness in the relations between the US and Israel enabled Israel and intelligence to push back the Iranian regime, push forward with making peace and normalization with the Arab Sunni world. And actually the Middle East was actually fairly stable by Middle East standards over the Trump administration, 4 years in power. So what does the future hold for Israel now in these new changing circumstances Israel finds itself in?
Well, Simon, with all what I know, I'm not a prophet. And I cannot tell you what will be in the future. And I'm not a future teller as well. What I'm saying is that it all depends on those who shape the American policy in Washington, D.C. If they understand the gravity of the problems in the Middle East, which a wrong policy can create, they will be much more careful than Obama. Yet, when I see the people and I see their boss, don't forget, Obama was with full capacity. He was young, relatively, and he was very opinionated, and he controlled many things under his jurisdiction. Joe Biden is far, far from being as sharp as Obama was, far from being as alert as Obama was, and between you and me, I'm not sure at all that he will finish 4 years because of his situation, and I'm not the first to say it. So depends now who will replace him. Of course, his vice president definitely, but depends what power will be all those people in the State Department and his in the administration who will push forward in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and in other countries as well. How in favor will be this administration with the Iranians? I have no idea. And how much there will be against Israel and Saudis and the Bahrainis and the Emiratis. I have no idea. I hope for the best.
And finally, down to a minute and a half of the program, Mordechai, what role can our Christian viewers play in standing with Israel and the Jewish people? Because it seems, again, that Israel is really going to need Christians in Britain, the United States, and around the world to really not only to pray for Israel, but really to make a stand for Israel during the coming months and years.
Well, in Britain, since you have local elections, constituencies, try to make sure that your representative in the parliament will be somebody who will support Israel. Definitely, it can be done. In America as well, the evangelical communities in some places are very, very powerful. But another thing I would like to tell you, Simon, there is an application on the App Store named Newsrael. Newsrael, Newsrael. This is a information feed 24/7, fully free, which brings good information about Israel, positive information. Everything is accurate, everything is right, no stories there. But it doesn't bash Israel on left and right. And in this, unlike other mainstream media, I highly encourage everyone who watches this program here to download this application and to see what information can be done and what information can be used when it comes to Israel.
Excellent. Mordechai Kedar, I just thank you so much for being my special guest on today's Middle East Report. I found my interview with you absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure our viewers will as well. And I want to thank you all for watching this very special interview today with Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who's one of the world's leading Middle East experts and experts on Islam. We've seen during this interview that he paints a kind of very scary picture of what the Middle East is going to be like under the presidency of Joe Biden, which means that Christians need to step up their support for Israel and the Jewish people through this very dark and turbulent time. So thank you for watching this home edition of the Middle East Report.